Hello, everyone, and we welcome you to Unit 3 here of AP World History, trying to kind of get ahead and not be bogged down by having to use class time. I've shared with you the guided notes for this unit. You can actually make a copy of it from Google Classroom, and you can fill it in as you watch this video. You can just type right on it, and you can have a copy there. I'll check for accuracy as we go forward. So make sure that you're following along with Unit 3, Topic 1, Empires Expand. So Unit 3 is an important unit for many reasons. Number one, we are going into a new time period from 1450 until roughly 1750. And then we are looking at as well a new unit. And this unit we are learning about what are called the gunpowder empires. These are empires in Eurasia that use the technology of gunpowder to expand, both as to militarily, to create multi-ethnic empires, controlling large areas, large numbers of people, coming into contact with smaller peoples as well, and either conquering them or using their power and influence culturally or politically to interact with them. This unit has only 3 sections, so it'll kind of go kind of quick. Here in Unit 1, we are going to look mainly at governance of these gunpowder empires. So we'll look at government, we'll look at culture, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with Section 3. All right, so here are our 3 learning objectives for this section. You can see these are the 3 big points that we'll be talking about today. It says imperial expansion relied on increased use of gunpowder, cannons, and armed trade to establish large empires in both hemispheres. So just kind of pay attention to that. We're going to be talking about the eastern and western hemispheres. So we'll be looking at empires built in the New World. It says land empires include the Manchu in Central and East Asia, the Mughal in South and Central Asia, Ottomans in the Middle East and North Africa, and the Safavids in the Middle East. We'll be learning about those 4 specifically in this unit. And then it says political and religious disputes lead to rivalries and conflicts between these states. And so we're going to see how religious and political rivalries are actually going to lead to conflicts between some of these empires, which is going to make sense once you see the geographic locations of where they are. All right, so the first 3 gunpowder empires they're primarily Islamic, so this is taking place after the fall of the Mongol Empire, right? So we had the Pax Mongolia, or Mongolica, I guess they call it, where the descendants of Genghis Khan had established 4 states stretching from the Yuan dynasty in China all the way to the Golden Horde in Russia and Ilkhanate in Southwest Asia. And kind of in the remnants of this empire, there will be new empires that will arise using some of the same technologies, using some of the same techniques as the Mongols to establish control, as you'll see. But these are the 3 that we'll talk about: Ottomans, Safavids, and the Mughals. All right, so your goal will be to kind of know where each of these are located, like what's the capital city, what area is it around geographically, and then that will kind of help keep tabs of the differences between them. Remember, anytime that if I go too quickly, you can always pause this, go back and rewatch it, or whatever you need to do to fill in the information on your slideshows as we move forward. All right, so there are some other empires that will expand during this period. The Empire of Russia will also expand. Russia was part of the Mongol Empire of the Golden Horde in extreme Eastern Europe and extreme Western Asia. Russia as a major power and as a major player in history rises during this period. We'll talk about Russia in the future. A new dynasty will kind of establish itself. This is what's known as the Qing dynasty in Chinese history, or will take over for the Ming, which had replaced the Mongol Yuan dynasty. And the rulers of the Ming dynasty, or Qing, excuse me, will come from Manchuria. So that's why this is known as the Manchu dynasty. So it's actually a foreign group that will be ruling China. And then the Songhai Empire, which remember was an empire of West Africa, and it conquered the Mali Empire, which remember centered around Timbuktu, the empire of Mansa Musa. It was conquered in this time and was expanding as well. So there are other empires that are growing and expanding during the same time that we're seeing the growth of the three gunpowder empires. Now, one empire that is kind of overshot in our time period that we really haven't talked about, that is kind of a important one, is that what becomes the centerpiece, the epicenter of the gunpowder empires, comes out of a dynasty known as the Timurid dynasty. The guy you see on your screen here, this is Tamerlane, as he is known in English, which stands for Timur the Lame. He was disfigured. He had a withered right arm, which he did not have the use of, and he also had a messed up leg and did limp. And so he was known as Timur the Lame, but he was an extremely capable military leader, very ruthless, and conquered a large amount of territory. He was of both Turkic and Mongol origin, and used that cultural ideology that he was born with to be both an expansive and person interested in conquest. And so, as you can see, he says he developed a central imperial administration, strong military apparatus, and then led to a cultural renaissance. Like the Mongols that settled in Central Asia, he was Islamic, and so cultural renaissance both in poetry, writing, and architecture. There are several buildings in modern-day Uzbekistan is where Timur the Lame's empire was centered, the city of Samarkand, that you can actually visit today. You can visit some of his old palaces, as well as the place where he was buried in Samarkand. Some beautiful examples of Islamic architecture. I encourage you to, if you have some extra time, look it up online to see some of these examples of really beautiful mosaics and domed structures. But Tamerlane, this is an actual sculpture that was made from his skeleton. They found it. The Soviets controlled Uzbekistan, or modern-day Uzbekistan, in the early mid-20th century, in the 1940s. A cultural anthropologist from the Soviet Union opened his tomb and reconstructed his face from his skull, and so this is an actual sculpture of what he might have looked like based upon the skull structure he had, which is kind of interesting. This is the Timurid Empire, as you can see, and if you go back in your notes and see that it fits quite well with where Ilkhanate was located, right on top of that. You can see the Golden Horde, the Mongol Empire in Russia to the north, the Delhi Sultanate there in the main part of the Indian subcontinent. I'll use my clicker here to point at that. And then you can see over here in China, the Ming Dynasty, which had by 1400 had replaced the Yuan Dynasty. So remember the modern countries that we have that are here. You've got Iran basically here, Afghanistan and Pakistan in this region. Up in here is where you have Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, areas like that. So kind of this Central Asian region that was part of the Empire of Tamerlane. So as you look at this, you'll notice that the empires that we're talking about will kind of appear and develop in some of these same regions. The first one we're going to look at is over here in the west. This was what the Romans called Asia Minor, right here, known as Anatolia as well in the ancient world. This outcropping here, this is of course, the Eastern Mediterranean Sea here in the south. In the north, this is the Black Sea. Here, in this region right here is the western portion of Russia. In that region, this is also, of course, known as the modern-day country of Turkey, as Anatolia. And as you can see, the group that controls this region are known as the Ottomans, and they're the first of the three gunpowder empires that we will talk about. All right, so the Ottomans get their name from a Turkic nomadic leader whose name was Osman. And Osman was a tribal leader, and his family, as they established control over these nomadic peoples. So remember, we talked about the Seljuk Turks. They were also Turkic. The people of Osman was a different tribe that became known as the Ottomans. They converted to Islam, and slowly over about a 250-year period began to build into a major land force. They settled down and used their superior military technologies to begin conquering. We're going to begin talking about the Ottomans with their conquest of Constantinople, the ancient imperial city, which had been built by Constantine way back in the 4th century A.D., and now would be no longer Christian, the home of the Byzantine Empire, but after 1453 became the center of the new Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire begins with Mehmed the Conqueror, as he's called, or Mehmed II, and he is the person that is most responsible for creating the Ottoman Empire as we know it today. Mehmed, as you can see, was most important for the conquering of Constantinople, establishing this as a new city for the Ottomans. It became known as Istanbul. Many of the former Christian churches in the great Byzantine city were turned into mosques. The Byzantine Empire ceases to exist. That line going all the way back 1,000 years from Rome to the Eastern Empire ended with the fall of Constantinople. And Mehmed was largely able to do this because of the army that he had built, which was extremely mobile, using a combination of artillery, infantry, and cavalry troops. And most importantly, they developed humongous artillery pieces that were largely responsible for the destruction of the walls of Constantinople. And with the destruction of the walls, the city was breached, and that allowed Mehmed's troops to ultimately force the capitulation of the imperial troops of the Byzantine Empire, and therefore leading to their collapse, the death of the emperor, and therefore the establishing of the new empire. This is a picture of some of his artillery. There's the Sultan Mehmed standing next to his artillery on the left, and on the right, this is a picture of what was known as the Basilica gun, which was a humongous artillery piece. It was about 25 feet long. It shot a cannonball that was about 12 to 1,500 pounds in weight, and larger than like 3 basketballs put together. It was a very, very large piece of solid shot. It could shoot a distance of almost a mile, and it was so immense, and the heat was so intense from when it was shot from the cannon. They could only shoot it 3 times a day, else the cannon would split and would explode. The insides of the cannon would explode. It caused major destruction when the cannonball hit the walls of Constantinople, and it was so violent when it shot that it would kind of move backwards, and many artillery men that operated the cannon were killed just because of the volatile nature of the gun. But pretty amazing piece of technology for the mid-15th century, and largely responsible, as we said, for Mehmet's conquering of Constantinople. Now, as you're going to see as we look at this section, we're going to talk about kind of the founder of each of these dynasties, and then some of the most important rulers of the dynasty. So your greatest ruler of the Ottoman Empire is Suleiman the Magnificent. So here is a picture of Mehmet's reign. You can see that the empire largely centered around Eastern Europe and Anatolia, or Asia Minor. And then by the time Suleiman the Magnificent died in 1566, a century later, you can see that they have expanded their empire in Europe, almost to the Germanic states, most of modern-day Greece and the Balkans, and parts of Hungary, as you can see in the map, were under Ottoman rule in Europe. You had parts of the Levant, so the Holy Lands, under the control of the Ottomans. They controlled Mecca and Medina, the holy cities of Islam, as you can see in the map. Controlled Egypt, and then all the way across North Africa. So very powerful empire was the Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful in the world in the 16th century. Here is a picture of Suleiman the Magnificent. Not sure what the fashion statement is being made by the Ottoman sultans, as they are known, wearing the big hat. But Suleiman was known as the lawgiver, and his time in office is, or I say office, but his time as reigning sultan or ruler of the Ottoman Empire was its height, its golden age. As you can see, 46 years from 1520 to 1566. It's when the Ottoman Empire reached its greatest size, its greatest military strength, its greatest economic strength, and he established what's known as the Civil Code, the Kanun name, which means the Code of Laws, which was a civil law code to go along with Islamic religious law. So many times he's also, Suleiman, as I said, is called the lawgiver, because he establishes this administrative law which deals with taxes, which deals with relationships between Muslims and non-Muslims, and things like that. But because it was used across the empire, it created an efficient system of governance that gave local autonomy to a lot of groups. But because they had a uniform law code, the Sultan's power could be consistent no matter where you were in the empire. So very important for creating a strong civil authority, civil government for the Ottomans during this period. It was also a period of great building, art, literature, and architecture. And though he had many campaigns into Europe, Suleiman also created alliances with some European states, trying to create peace on his eastern or his western borders. As you'll see, part of the reason is that he was having trouble in the eastern section. In the eastern part of the Ottoman Empire, there was another Islamic empire that was arising, and that is our next one we're going to talk about, which is the Safavids. All right, so the Safavid Empire replaces what had been Tamerlane's empire in modern-day Iran. All right, so this is Ismail, who becomes the Shah, which is the Persian name for king. So remember that even though we were in a Islamic region, right, all three of these empires that we're going to look at are Muslim, right? They have different cultural beginnings. The Ottomans are Turks. The Safavids, as we're talking about now, they are Persian, and they will rise in Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Now, the name Safavid comes from the fact that Ishmael was a descendant of a great Sufi leader. Remember that Sufism is Islamic mysticism, a very strong spiritual tradition in the Muslim world, and was very much a missionary sect of Islam. And so religion, as you might expect, is going to be a major role within the Safavid Empire. So the Safavids are going to kind of center their empire on the modern-day Iran. Now they're going to build a capital at Isfahan, which is to the west of Samarkand, which was the capital of Tamerlane. They are going to be distinctly different. Though they're Muslim, they're going to be a different type of Islam than the Ottomans. They're going to also constantly be in conflict with their neighbors to the west, both religiously and politically. The Safavids reached their greatest heights under Shah Abbas, or Abbas the Great as he is known. This is a picture of the Safavid Empire. You made a map earlier, or hopefully you figured out a way to kind of draw where the Tamerlane's empire was on your sheet. And so you see here that the Safavids are located almost right over top of where the center of the Timurid dynasty had been located. So you see the Ottomans there to the west, and you see the Safavids in the center. And then we haven't talked about them yet, but notice now in South Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, there you have the Mughal Empire. So the Safavids, as you can see, is kind of sandwiched between the two. All right, the Safavids did utilize gunpowder to great effect. Not really artillery the way that the Ottomans did, but the Safavids had developed a group of musketeers. Musketeers are obviously soldiers that use muskets as their primary weapon. You can see the musketeer here with his distinct red shirt and dress. He's got his cartridges and bullets in his pocket, and also carrying a sword, which can act like a bayonet. And then you notice they also developed swivel cannons, which shot either small solid cannonballs or what are called canister, which are like little shots like a big shotgun, right? And the swivel cannon could be put on a camel saddle, and so you could have the camel sit and you could kind of turn it any direction you wanted. Basically like a desert cavalry weapon, as you see there. So it's some neat military innovations that the Safavids used over their rivals in this region. All right, so Shah Abbas the Great, as you can see, he is almost at the same time as Suleiman the Magnificent in the Ottoman Empire. Shah Abbas is a period of a golden age of Safavid culture, building a beautiful capital at Isfahan with, again, beautiful palaces and mosques, trying to not be involved in conquest, but involved in establishing trade with his neighbors, as well as spending money and time and effort, as we said, expanding the arts. All right, remember our third historical development that was listed on the sheet is that political and religious disputes led to rivalries and conflicts between the states. One such war is one between the Ottomans and the Safavids. Now you can see that there were border disputes, right? The western border of the Safavid Empire met with the eastern border of the Ottoman Empire, right, around the Caucasus Mountains, which is modern-day Russia, as well as Georgia, the country of Georgia, and Armenia. That's the Caucasus region. It's very close to Anatolia or Turkey today. They were constantly fighting each other over these borders, and so they were competing for who would control that region. But probably most important was on the other side was the religious side. The Ottomans were, like a majority of Muslims, were Sunni Muslims, and the Safavids were what are called Shias or Shiites. The religious break apart of these two empires was a huge problem because the Shia did not like the Sunni, and they would kick the Sunni out of Safavid territory. And in response, the Sunni Ottomans would use their military power very harshly against Shia Safavids. And so the religious conflict was probably even more important in causing the conflict between the Ottomans and the Safavids. This conflict between Sunni and Shia still carries on into today, as a majority of Muslims are Sunni, but you have Shia Muslims still kind of in and out of Iran. The third gunpowder empire is the Mughals. And the Mughals are going to arise from India. All right, and they're going to conquer the Delhi Sultanate, which is in northern India, and they will establish, again, Islamic rule in the region. So the founder of the Mughal is Babur. And as you can see, on his father's side, he was related to Tamerlane. And on his mother's side, he was related to Genghis Khan. So a pretty good family tree as far as military and conquering goes. And Babur used that to his advantage, conquered the Delhi sultans, and established a new Islamic rule in northern India that actually expanded through periods of time to control most of India at certain points. All right, so there you can see the Battle of Panipat, which is where the Delhi Sultan was killed and ended the Delhi Sultanate and allowed Babur to conquer and take over the ruling of northern India. You see the Kingdom of Fergana over there, which is in modern-day Pakistan. That was where Babur had originated, which had been the Timurid dynasty, and really was the Western Safavid dynasty at that point. All right. So the Mughal Empire begins, as you can see there, in northern India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. All right. The guy riding the elephant here is Akbar. He was the greatest and most cultured ruler of the Mughal dynasty, as you can see, 1556 to 1605. Again, you can think about the mid-1500s when you had Suleiman ruling the Ottomans, you had Shah Abbas ruling in the Safavid Empire, and you had Akbar that was ruling in the Mughals. All three of these gunpowder empires kind of experiencing a golden age almost contemporaneously, which means, of course, at the same time. Akbar, very important in his military expansion of the empire, using battle elephants and other things like that, which was kind of unique to India and Indian military fighting. But as we'll talk about later, the Mughal Empire will experience a cultural golden age as well during this time, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. All right, the final period of Mughal expansion was under the leadership of Aurangzeb, who, as you can see, ruled from 1658 to 1707. And you can see that under his rule, the Mughals conquered almost all of India except the extreme south, Tamil Nadu, down there in the very bottom. That was the only area of the subcontinent that was kept out of Mughal control. His reign was marked by internal rebellions, which greatly reduced his ability to hold on to this land. And after his death, Aurangzeb's empire quickly began to fall apart. Part of the internal rebellions was over religion. Aurangzeb was devoutly Muslim and suppressed Hinduism throughout India, which, as you can imagine, with a majority of the population being Hindu, did not go over well. Akbar, who had ruled, of course, the century before, was known for his religious tolerance. Even though he was Muslim, Hindus had great religious tolerance under Akbar. That was not the case under Aurangzeb. And again, we'll talk more about that in the future. And then, as you can see, there was a conflict between the Mughals and the Safavids, a short war between the two groups in the west. And again, as you can see, Sunni and Shia is one of the major reasons. And then, as you can see, Shah Jahan, the ruler of the Mughals, wanted to expand territory. So he looked to conquer lands in modern-day Pakistan to take them away from the Safavids. Shah Jahan, whose name you see mentioned there, you know him if you've heard of him at all or seen his handiwork. He was the ruler of India that built the great mausoleum, the Taj Mahal, for he and his wife, where they are buried. So we'll talk more about Shah Jahan later when we look at Mughal culture in a future section. All right, so not an Islamic gunpowder empire, but important empire to rise in the same time period is the Qing dynasty. So the Qing dynasty is actually the last imperial dynasty in Chinese history, because it would be replaced by a national government, a non-imperial government in 1911, which of course was replaced by the communist government in 1949. So the Qing dynasty, like the Yuan previous, was a foreign-born empire. The Yuan dynasty, as you can see, was, remember, that was Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis, who established the Yuan dynasty, which lasts about a century. And then you had the Ming dynasty, which was a Han Chinese, which means native Chinese dynasty, which lasts roughly 300 years. And then the Manchurians, you can see rising from the northern area of China, conquered the Han territory and established a new ruling dynasty, which we call Qing. All right, this is Dorgan, who was the leader of the Manchus. Notice the writing, very different than traditional Chinese characters, and this is because it is, you can see, it's based on the Uyghur script that the Mongols used. And so when you see writing in this fashion, that's going to, of course, be Manchu script, not traditional Chinese script. So Beijing, which had been the northern capital of the Chinese empire, becomes kind of the seat of power permanently under the Manchus, because it's in northern China. It's the area they controlled first, and therefore it will become kind of the imperial center. All right, so notice the Manchu text. All right, these are, you can see some of these coins have traditional Chinese text, and then you also have some that are going to have Manchurian text, and you can see if you can find some of those. One there. One there. All right. So the Qing did use gunpowder, right? The High Qing, or the Qing Golden Age. Remember that gunpowder had initially risen from China, and so the Qing were able to use this to their advantage. You can see these different weapons, from the cannons to the small muskets, as the Manchurian guy is riding. Notice this guy here. This is typical of a Manchurian soldier with the new style haircut, where you had to cut your hair off except for the very back of your head, and you grew your hair in a long braid, which was called a queue. But we'll talk more about that in the future. All right, here's a couple of important Qing emperors. Kangxi, who was the one that actually founded the dynasty in 1661, and then Qianlong, who had the longest reign of any Qing emperor, right? As you can see, expanding the empire. So you can see they're expanding it both eastward and westward. But Qianlong, again, as many Chinese had tried to do to conquer areas of Southeast Asia, was unsuccessful. Again, we're going to talk a lot more about the cultural developments of these empires in the future. We're just kind of establishing what these empires look like, important rulers, things like that, how they use gunpowder. And here's 4 others in Eurasia that will use gunpowders to expand. Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible as he's also known, would defeat the remnants of the Mongols and the Golden Horde in the Battle of Kazan in the late 1400s and establish Muscovite control of Russia. We would see a consolidation and a defeat of the Manchus by the Koreans to basically keep their land independent. And you saw in Champa, the southern area of the Mekong Delta, was conquered by the Dai Viet peoples. And then in Morocco, the Saudi Sultanate is able to defeat the Portuguese in this region using gunpowder. And this is kind of our basic ideas to finish up. All right, so the Muslim empires will rise from the remnants of the Timurid dynasty, which of course had risen from the remnants of the Mongol dynasties in the 12 and 1300s. The Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals all were created by conquering rulers. Mehmed for the Ottomans, Ismail for the Safavids, Babur for the Mughals, and then their greatest rulers, Suleiman, Shah Abbas, and Akbar. The Ottomans and Safavids and the Mughals and Safavids fought for both religious and political reasons, right? The religious largely has to do with disagreements because the Safavids are Shia Muslim versus the Ottomans and Mughals, which are Sunni Muslim, right? And that these religious differences still exist today in the modern world, right? The Manchus conquered China and created a foreign dynasty, the Qing, right? Again, using gunpowder to help and aid their expansion. And then other empires and states like Russia, like the dynasty in Korea, etc., would use gunpowder also to help create control of specific areas across the globe. So that's very quickly Unit 3.1. Now that we've finished this, we can kind of move on to look at more things and move quickly through Unit 3 as we head towards the end of the first semester. Thank you guys, and I'll see you soon.